In a Victorian house in Portland, an isolated young adult faced their family's ultimate betrayal. What started as loving concern became a shocking intervention to strip their independence. Alex Thimberland wasn't your typical reclusive heir. For 3 years, they'd built an international vintage computer restoration business, known for methodical precision and quiet brilliance. When encountering their family's plan to institutionalize them, Alex's apparent compliance would lead to their relatives' legal destruction. What began as a loving intervention became strategic revenge. The Thimberland family would never recover after discovering their helpless relative had been 10 steps ahead all along. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Apple IIe's amber monitor illuminated Alex Thimberland's focused expression as they worked with surgical precision on the vintage computer's internals. Their workshop, occupying the entire third floor of their grandmother's Victorian house, was a testament to methodical organization. Wooden shelves lined with labeled component boxes, workstations arranged with military efficiency. Serial number A2S60047832, Alex murmured into their headset, documenting every step. Replacing power supply capacitors. Original manufacture, October 1983. The restoration was commissioned by Portland Technology Museum for $8,000, one of several lucrative projects that funded Alex's comfortable lifestyle, though their family remained oblivious to such financial success. Alex's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Tokyo, another restoration offer. Their reputation in the global vintage computing community had grown far beyond their family's comprehension, extending to museums and collectors worldwide who valued their expertise. Across town, Rosalind Fairweather reviewed glossy brochures in Dr. Sarah Pemberton's office at Sunset Manor. The assisted living facility promised dignified care for individuals with special needs through structured supervision and appropriate boundaries. Alex has always been delicate, Rosalind explained with practiced concern. The autism diagnosis confirmed what we suspected. Living alone in that house isn't safe. They need guidance, structure. Her notebook contained detailed observations documenting Alex's supposed decline. The isolation has worsened. They barely leave the house, just plays with old computers all day. Dr. Pemberton nodded sympathetically. After 15 years handling similar cases, she recognized the familiar pattern of families struggling with adult children's independence. Our evaluation process takes 3 to 4 weeks. We'll need medical records and family input about daily capabilities. I've documented everything. We should have acted sooner. In the workshop, Alex paused their restoration to review business correspondence. 3 new project inquiries, including one from Berlin's Computer Museum. Their professional network spanned continents, an invisible career existing entirely outside family awareness. Alex's methodical nature extended beyond restoration work. A notebook beside their workstation contained 6 months of family behavior documentation, each entry timestamped and cross-referenced with characteristic precision. September 15th, Mother's third call about house expenses. September 22nd, Arabella's unexpected visit, detailed questions about routines. October 3rd, Father's medical bills, $2,847 neurologist visit. October 10th, Henry's scripted isolation concerns. Patterns emerged suggesting coordinated activity among normally distant family members. The house phone interrupted Alex's documentation. Theodore's voice carried forced cheerfulness. "How are you today, kiddo?" "Fine, Dad, working on a museum piece." "Good, staying busy." His tone shifted tentatively. "Alex, have you considered having help around the house?" Alex recorded the conversation's timestamp and phrasing. "I don't need help. Everything's fine. Your mother and I worry about that big house, all those stairs. What if something happened?" The concern sounded genuine, but Alex noted recurring themes: isolation, safety, the house being too much. Identical talking points their mother raised repeatedly. "Are you okay, Dad? You sound tired."
Theodore's lengthy pause allowed Alex to hear Rosalind's background voice, words indistinct. "Just medical stuff, nothing to worry about." After hanging up, Alex opened their laptop to legal databases they'd researched for weeks. Articles about adult guardianship, financial exploitation, family intervention strategies painted disturbing pictures of how easily autonomy could vanish when families presented united fronts claiming welfare concerns. Alex's business phone chimed with River Kim's message, "Coffee tomorrow? Need to talk about Stuttgart job." The message carried subtle weight. River understood Alex's family dynamics intimately, their communications often containing invisible layers of meaning. Tomorrow's meeting would prove crucial, though Alex suspected computer restoration was merely pretext. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Alex continued meticulous documentation while the Apple IIe restoration proceeded flawlessly. Each component was tested and verified before installation, but increasingly their attention drifted beyond vintage repair work. The evidence accumulated daily, conversations ending abruptly upon Alex's arrival, hushed discussions between normally distant siblings, their mother's sudden safety concerns that had never previously troubled her. Their family was orchestrating something significant. Alex closed their documentation notebook, returning to computer restoration. Precision, patience, and careful detail had transformed their hobby into a thriving profession. Those same skills would serve them well in whatever confrontation approached. The Apple IIe's steady green power light marked another successful day's work. Outside, Portland's autumn twilight bathed the Victorian house in golden light, the same illumination that had graced their grandmother's workshop decades before. This house represented their sanctuary, business headquarters, and carefully constructed life. It stood at the center of their family's mysterious planning. But vintage computer restoration had taught Alex patience. Some problems required extensive analysis before action. Others demanded immediate, decisive response. The time for analysis was nearly over. The morning light that had illuminated Alex's workshop the previous evening now cast sharp shadows across Arabella Whitmore's dining room table, where financial documents spread like battle plans. Her husband, Graham, sat quietly in the corner, nursing coffee and studying his wife's animated gestures with growing unease. "We can't wait any longer," Arabella said, her marketing executive voice cutting through the room's tension. "Every day Alex stays in that house costs us money we don't have. The property taxes alone are bleeding value from what should be our inheritance." Rosalind nodded approvingly from her seat at the table's head. Dr. Pemberton confirmed they have immediate availability. The evaluation process can be expedited if we present a united family front. Henry Davenlock had remained silent throughout the morning's discussion, but finally spoke. "Have any of you actually asked Alex what they want? Their autism doesn't make them incapable of having preferences." The room fell quiet. Rosalind's expression hardened. "Henry, we've discussed this. Alex can't make these kinds of decisions objectively. They've become too isolated, too dependent on routines that aren't healthy." "But their computer work. Playing with old electronics isn't a career. It's a hobby that's gotten out of hand. Alex needs structure, professional care, people who understand their limitations." Graham finally looked up from his coffee. "What if they refuse to go?" Arabella's pause was almost imperceptible. Dr. Pemberton explained the process. With proper documentation of incapacity and family consensus, the transition can be managed smoothly. Her voice carried the clinical detachment she used in boardroom presentations. "It's really for their own good. Henry's social work training recognized the euphemisms, the careful language that obscured the reality of what they were planning. Arabella, you're talking about forcing someone into institutional care against their will. I'm talking about protecting my sibling from themselves, she snapped. Unlike some people, I'm not content to watch them waste away in that house while their inheritance evaporates. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Henry's graduate student income couldn't compete with Arabella's aggressive pragmatism or their mother's emotional manipulation. But the moral weight of their plan settled heavily on his shoulders. When? Theodore asked quietly. This weekend, Rosalind said. Dr. Pemberton suggested we present this as a family meeting, not an intervention. Less threatening that way. Graham's discomfort deepened. He'd been unemployed for 6 months, his architecture career derailed by industry downturns and his own struggle with depression. His wife's enthusiasm for this plan troubled him in ways he couldn't articulate. What if Alex has friends who object? Alex doesn't have friends, Arabella said dismissively. That's part of the problem. Across town, Alex was proving that assessment spectacularly wrong. River Kim arrived at the Victorian house carrying coffee and an expression that suggested their Stuttgart job conversation would cover far more than computer restoration. Your family's been busy, River said without preamble, settling into Alex's workshop with familiar ease. Their friendship had developed through online vintage computing forums, but grew deeper when they'd discovered their shared experience of neurodivergent navigation in a neurotypical world. Alex looked up from their current project, a Commodore 64 requiring delicate motherboard repair. You've heard something. River's expression grew serious. Graham Morrison called his brother last night. Drunk, guilty, needed someone to talk to. River's expression grew serious. His brother mentioned it to a mutual friend who knows me. The intervention's scheduled for this weekend. Alex's hands remained steady as they continued their precise soldering work. I suspected as much. The timing fits their recent behavior patterns. Alex, they're planning to have you committed to assisted living against your will. I know. Alex's voice carried no surprise, only quiet resolve. I've been preparing for this possibility for months. River studied their friend's calm demeanor. What kind of preparing? Alex set down their soldering iron and moved to a filing cabinet that River had assumed contained computer documentation. Instead, Alex withdrew folders thick with legal documents, business records, and correspondence. Client testimonials, financial statements, legal research, documentation of their coordination efforts. You've been building a case. I've been protecting myself. Alex's voice carried steel beneath its quiet surface. They see someone who plays with old computers in their grandmother's house. They don't see someone who operates an international restoration business, maintains relationships with museums worldwide, or understands exactly what legal protections exist for disabled adults facing family exploitation. River examined the documentation with growing amazement. Alex's business records revealed consistent 5-figure monthly revenues, glowing testimonials from prestigious institutions, and evidence of a professional network spanning continents. Your family has no idea about any of this. They've never asked. They see autism and assume incapacity. Alex returned to their soldering work. It's a common mistake. Often a costly one. What's your plan? Alex's slight smile carried no warmth. Let them proceed. Document everything, then respond appropriately. River understood their friend well enough to recognize the careful phrasing. Alex operated like their restoration work, methodical, precise, with contingencies planned for every possible outcome. You're not going down without a fight. I'm not going down at all, Alex corrected. But they don't know that yet. As River helped organize client testimonials and business correspondence, the full scope of Alex's preparation became clear. This wasn't reactive defense. It was strategic offense,
planned and executed with the same precision Alex brought to vintage computer restoration. The family's intervention was scheduled for the weekend, but they had no idea they were walking into a confrontation with someone who'd been 10 steps ahead from the beginning. Saturday morning arrived with deceptive calm. Alex had spent the previous evening carefully arranging their workshop to appear more chaotic than usual. Scattered components suggesting disorganization, incomplete projects implying inability to focus. The performance would require precise calibration, vulnerable enough to justify their family's concerns, competent enough to avoid seeming completely helpless. River had left after helping organize the real documentation, now safely secured in encrypted files and a safety deposit box across town. What remained visible were carefully selected pieces of evidence enough to support Alex's facade without revealing the depth of their preparation. The doorbell rang at precisely 10 o'clock. Alex activated the small recording device hidden beneath their workbench, then composed their expression into one of mild confusion before answering the door. Rosalind stood flanked by the entire family, her smile radiating maternal concern. Behind her, Theodore's hands trembled slightly. Whether from Parkinson's or nerves remained unclear. Arabella carried herself with boardroom confidence, while Henry hung back, his discomfort evident. Dr. Pemberton completed the group, her professional demeanor lending institutional authority to the gathering. "Sweetheart," Rosalind said, stepping forward to embrace Alex, "we thought it was time for a family meeting. There are some things we need to discuss." Alex allowed themselves to appear slightly overwhelmed by the unexpected gathering. "Is everything okay? Dad, your health?" "I'm fine, kiddo," Theodore said, though his voice lacked conviction. "We just want to talk." They moved into the Victorian house's formal living room, a space Alex rarely used but had carefully prepared for this moment. Dr. Pemberton's eyes swept the room, cataloging details that would support her professional assessment. "Alex," Rosalind began, settling onto the sofa with practiced grace, "we've all been worried about you. Living alone in this big house, spending so much time isolated upstairs." "I'm not isolated," Alex said, their voice carrying just enough defensiveness to seem genuine. "I have my work." Arabella leaned forward, her expression mixing concern with barely concealed impatience. "Alex, playing with old computers isn't really work. It's a hobby that's keeping you from engaging in the real world. Those computers are important." "We know you think they are," Rosalind interrupted gently. "But sweetheart, you barely leave the house anymore. When's the last time you had a real conversation with someone besides family?" Alex's silence was calculated, allowing their relatives to interpret it as proof of their isolation rather than strategic choice. Dr. Pemberton made notes on her tablet, documenting what she perceived as social withdrawal. Theodore shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Alex, with my medical situation getting more expensive and your mother worried about you being alone," his voice trailed off, the unfinished sentence hanging heavy with implication. "What your father's trying to say," Arabella interjected, "is that maintaining this house is becoming a significant financial burden."
The property taxes, utilities, maintenance, it's not sustainable. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Dr. Pemberton chose this moment to introduce herself professionally. "Alex, I'm Dr. Pemberton from Sunset Manor. Your family asked me to meet you because they're concerned about your daily living capabilities." Alex appeared to shrink slightly, their shoulders drawing inward in what looked like anxiety but was actually controlled performance. "Daily living?" "Simple things," Dr. Pemberton said kindly. "Managing finances, maintaining social connections, ensuring proper nutrition and self-care. Your family has observed some concerning patterns." The house is too much for you, Rosalind added, her voice soft with maternal authority. All those stairs, the isolation, the responsibility. We found a wonderful facility where you'd have support, structure, people who understand your needs. Alex's eyes widened with apparent shock. You want to put me in an institution? Not an institution, Dr. Pemberton corrected professionally. Sunset Manor is a residential community designed for adults who need assistance with independent living. We have excellent programs for individuals on the autism spectrum. Henry finally spoke, his voice carrying reluctant support for the family position. Alex, maybe it would be good to have more social interaction, structured activities. Arabella sensed Alex's apparent vulnerability and pressed her advantage. The house would be sold, of course. The proceeds would fund your care and help with Dad's medical expenses. It's really the most practical solution for everyone. The room fell silent as Alex appeared to process this information. Their expressions cycled through shock, hurt, and what looked like resigned acceptance. Dr. Pemberton documented these responses as evidence of emotional instability and decision-making difficulty. Alex's voice seemed smaller, more fragile. I need time to think about this. Rosalind exchanged glances with Dr. Pemberton. Of course, sweetheart, but we can't wait too long. Your isolation is getting worse, and Dad's medical needs are urgent. How long do I have? Alex asked, their questions sounding more like capitulation than negotiation. Dr. Pemberton could arrange an evaluation next week, Arabella said quickly, just to assess your current capabilities, make sure the transition goes smoothly. Alex nodded slowly, appearing overwhelmed by the family's united front. If you really think it's best. The relief in the room was palpable. Rosalind smiled warmly, squeezing Alex's hand. We do, sweetheart.
We really do. Dr. Pemberton closed her tablet with satisfaction. I'll contact my office on Monday to schedule the evaluation. In the meantime, you might want to start thinking about which personal items you'd like to bring to your new home. As the family prepared to leave, each member appeared satisfied with the intervention's success. Theodore hugged Alex with genuine emotion, Arabella's tension visibly decreased, and even Henry seemed relieved that the confrontation had proceeded without open conflict. We'll be in touch soon, Rosalind said, kissing Alex's forehead. You're doing the right thing. Alex stood in the doorway, watching their family depart with expressions of accomplishment and relief. Dr. Pemberton shook Rosalind's hand, already discussing evaluation procedures and admission timelines. Only when the last card disappeared did Alex allow their performance mask to slip. They returned to their workshop, turned off the recording device, and opened their laptop to send a single encrypted message to Sebastian Greycourt. Intervention complete. Recorded confession obtained. Proceed with Phase 2. The family believed they had successfully convinced Alex to surrender their independence. They had no idea they had just provided detailed, recorded evidence of their coordinated plan to exploit a disabled relative under the guise of care. Alex's apparent capitulation was strategic theater. The real performance was about to begin. 20 minutes after the family's departure, Arabella's voice carried triumphant satisfaction through Ricar's speaker system as she conducted a conference call with her mother. That went better than expected. Alex barely put up any resistance. Dr. Pemberton seemed very pleased with how cooperative they were, Rosalind agreed, her relief evident. I was worried there might be more pushback, but Alex clearly understands this is for the best. Theodore's voice joined from his separate call. I feel terrible about the deception, but seeing how lost they looked, maybe we really are helping. Arabella's pragmatic nature reasserted itself. The evaluation's scheduled for Wednesday. Dr. Pemberton thinks we can have Alex moved by next weekend if everything goes smoothly. She paused at a traffic light, already mentally calculating the house's sale timeline. We should start researching real estate agents. In the Victorian house's workshop, Alex sat motionless for precisely 60 seconds
after sending the encrypted message to Sebastian Greycourt. Then, like a computer rebooting from safe mode into full operation, their entire demeanor transformed. The hunched shoulders straightened, the uncertain expression hardened into focused determination. The trembling hands became steady as they reached for their secure phone, bypassing the house line their family had used for their coordinated calls. "Sebastian, it's Alex." The intervention proceeded exactly as anticipated. "You recorded everything." Complete audio documentation, Dr. Pemberton's assessment recommendations, Arabella's financial motivations, Mother's coordination with the facility. Alex's tone was clinical, methodical. They provided everything we need to demonstrate premeditated exploitation. "Excellent. I'll have the legal papers prepared for service Monday morning. Are you certain about proceeding immediately?" Alex's slight smile carried no warmth. "They've given me exactly 72 hours before the evaluation that would begin formal commitment proceedings. I prefer to control the timeline." "The documentation you've provided over the past months is comprehensive. Their own recorded statements today will eliminate any doubt about their intentions."
Sebastian's voice carried the satisfaction of a lawyer who'd built an airtight case. "Alex, when this is over, they'll never be able to question your competence again." That's the point. The sound of River's motorcycle announced their arrival before the doorbell rang. Alex opened the door to find their friend carrying 2 cups of coffee and an expression mixing concern with anticipation. "How did it go?" River asked, settling into their familiar spot near Alex's workbench. "Perfectly." Alex accepted the coffee, their movements now carrying the confident precision that their family had never been allowed to witness. They documented their entire plan, including financial motivations and coordination with institutional support. Rivers studied their friend's transformation. The vulnerable, overwhelmed person from their family's visit had vanished completely, replaced by someone irradiating controlled competence. "You recorded it all." Audio, timestamps, witness statements. Alex opened her laptop, revealing files organized with military efficiency. Dr. Pemberton's professional assessment of my supposed incapacity, Arabella's admission that selling the house would fund their father's medical care, Mother's detailed planning with the facility. They have no idea what's coming. Alex's expression grew serious. "River, I need you to understand something. When I respond to their intervention, it won't be proportional to their crime. It will be designed to ensure they never attempt anything like this again." River had known Alex for 3 years, had seen their methodical approach to complex restoration projects, but this revealed depths of strategic thinking they'd never suspected. "What exactly are you planning?" Alex moved to a filing cabinet and withdrew folders containing business documentation their family had never seen. Client contracts worth over $200,000 in pending work, testimonials from 12 international museums, financial records showing consistent monthly income exceeding most professional salaries. River examined the documents with growing amazement. "Your monthly revenue is higher than my annual income. The Berlin Museum wants to retain me as their permanent restoration consultant. The Smithsonian has approved a 6-month fellowship proposal." Alex's voice carried quiet pride. "I've built something significant here, River. Something they want to destroy because it doesn't fit their assumptions about autism and capability. They genuinely believe you're incapable. They believe what they need to believe to justify taking control of my assets." Alex's tone hardened. Mother's financial stress, Arabella's resentment about the inheritance, father's medical bills. They've created a narrative where exploiting me becomes an act of love. River set down their coffee, recognizing the gravity of what Alex was revealing. "You've been planning this response for months. Since the first time Mother mentioned getting help managing the house." Alex returned to her computer, opening encrypted files containing legal research and strategic planning. "I researched every case of family financial exploitation, every legal protection available to disabled adults, every precedent for fighting involuntary commitment. And Sebastian Greycourt? Disability rights attorney, works pro bono for cases he considers important." Alex's slight smile returned. "He considers mine very important."
River understood their friend's methodical nature, but the scope of this preparation revealed something beyond careful planning. Alex, you're not just defending yourself, you're going to destroy them.
I'm going to teach them that underestimating someone based on disability assumptions carries consequences. Alex's voice was steady, implacable. They want to take my home, my business, my independence, my legal rights, all while telling themselves they're acting out of love. The workshop fell silent, except for the gentle hum of vintage computers and modern equipment. Alex's transformation was complete, from apparent victim to strategic opponent, from vulnerable relative to formidable adversary. When do they get served? River asked. Monday morning, simultaneous service to all parties involved in today's intervention. Alex closed their laptop with quiet finality. By Tuesday, they'll understand exactly how capable their helpless relative actually is. The family's intervention had succeeded beyond their expectations. Alex had appeared cooperative, vulnerable, ready to accept their guidance. They had no idea that their apparent victory was actually the final piece of evidence needed for their own legal destruction. The mask was off. The real Alex Thimberland was ready for war. Monday morning arrived with Portland's typical autumn drizzle, but for the Thimberland family, the weather would prove the least of their concerns. At precisely 8:47 a.m., as Rosalind finished her morning coffee while reviewing Sunset Manor's admission paperwork, her doorbell rang with authoritative persistence. Mrs. Rosalind Fairweather? The man standing on her doorstep wore an expensive suit and carried a leather portfolio that suggested serious business. Behind him, a second individual waited by a sedan with official plates. Yes, you've been served. He placed legal documents in her hands with professional courtesy. Have a good day, ma'am. Rosalind stared at the papers as the men departed, her mind struggling to process the cover page's stark language. Complaint for attempted financial exploitation and fraudulent guardianship proceedings. Her own name appeared as defendant, followed by her children's names and, inexplicably, Dr. Sarah Pemberton. The plaintiff's name stopped her breath entirely. Alex Thimberland. At precisely the same moment, 23 miles across town, Arabella was concluding a client conference call when her assistant knocked urgently on her office door. Ms. Whitmore, there are men here with legal documents. They said it's urgent. Arabella's marketing executive instincts immediately recognized a crisis situation. She accepted the papers with practiced calm, even as her assistant retreated and closed the door. The legal terminology was familiar from her corporate work, but seeing her name listed as defendant in a lawsuit filed by her own sibling created a surreal disconnect. Her hands shook slightly as she read Sebastian Greycourt's firm letterhead and the detailed allegations of financial exploitation. The complaint included specific dates, recorded conversations, and documented evidence of coordinated family intervention designed to gain control of Alex's assets under false pretenses. Theodore received his papers while sitting in Dr. Martinez's waiting room for his weekly Parkinson's consultation. The process server found him easily. His medical appointments were publicly scheduled, his routine predictable. The irony wasn't lost on Theodore that his predictable medical schedule had made him an easy target, just as his family had assumed Alex's predictable routines made them vulnerable. His tremor worsened as he read the allegations. The legal document painted his family's intervention in stark, unflattering terms, a coordinated scheme to exploit a disabled relative by falsely representing their incapacity to medical professionals and legal authorities. Dr. Pemberton's day began normally until her office manager burst through her door with unconcealed panic. "Doctor, there are attorneys here, with papers. They're saying something about legal proceedings." Sebastian Greycourt himself had chosen to personally serve Dr. Pemberton, recognizing that her professional standing required careful handling. "Dr. Pemberton, I'm Sebastian Greycourt, representing Alex Thimberland. You've been named as a defendant in proceedings related to attempted involuntary commitment without proper evaluation." "I don't understand. The family consultation was routine."
According to my client's documentation, you coordinated with family members to facilitate involuntary placement based solely on their representations without independent assessment of Mr. Thimberland's actual capabilities. Sebastian's tone remained professionally neutral. You'll want to review these documents carefully with legal counsel. Dr. Pemberton's medical training had prepared her for many crises, but never one where her professional judgment became the subject of legal challenge.
The papers detailed her conversations with Rosalind, her facility's financial interest in new admissions, and her failure to independently verify the family's claims about Alex's competence. By 10:30 a.m., frantic phone calls created a three-way conference between the family members as they struggled to comprehend their situation. "This has to be a mistake," Rosalind insisted, her voice carrying desperate authority. "Alex couldn't have arranged this. They barely leave the house." Arabella's boardroom training kicked in as she reviewed the legal documentation with growing horror. "Mother, this isn't a mistake. The allegations are detailed, specific, and professionally prepared. Someone's been documenting our conversations for months." "Alex doesn't have the capability." "Alex apparently has capabilities we never suspected," Theodore interrupted, his voice hollow with realization. "The business documentation they've provided, it's extensive." Arabella continued reading. Her marketing expertise recognized sophisticated strategic planning. They have client testimonials from international museums, financial records showing six-figure annual income, correspondence with legal professionals dating back 6 months. 6 months? Rosalind's voice climbed toward panic. "They've been planning this since we first mentioned helping with the house." Theodore finished quietly. The three-way call fell silent as the implications settled. Their intervention hadn't been a response to Alex's deterioration. It had been anticipated, documented, and used as evidence of their coordinated exploitation attempt. Sebastian Greycourt's office had included a cover letter with each legal service, written in Alex's precise, methodical voice. "To my family, you have spent years underestimating my capabilities based on ableist assumptions about autism and independence. This week, you attempted to exploit those assumptions to gain control of my assets and eliminate my legal autonomy. The attached documentation demonstrates that I have been aware of your coordination efforts for months and have prepared accordingly. The business records and client testimonials prove my competence beyond legal doubt. The recorded conversations prove your intentions beyond ethical defense. You will discover that the helpless relative you sought to protect has been protecting themselves far more effectively than you ever imagined. Consider this your education in the dangers of confusing autism with incapacity. Alex Thimberland." Henry's phone rang as he reviewed his own copy of the legal papers in his graduate school office. Arabella's voice carried barely controlled panic. "Henry, did you get—" "I got it." His social work training had given him enough legal knowledge to recognize the sophistication of Alex's case. "Arabella, we're in serious trouble." "This can't be happening. Alex is apparently a lot more capable than any of us realized." Henry's voice carried growing respect mixed with guilt. "Their business documentation is impressive. International clients, museum contracts, substantial revenue streams. But the autism doesn't make someone legally incompetent or financially incapable," Henry finished. "I tried to tell you that during the planning meetings." Dr. Pemberton's separate crisis was unfolding as her facility's legal counsel explained the serious professional implications. "Doctor, if their allegations are substantiated, you could face licensing review for participating in involuntary commitment proceedings without proper independent evaluation. The family provided detailed documentation of incapacity from biased sources with financial motivations, which your professional training should have recognized as insufficient for commitment recommendations." As Monday's legal earthquake continued its reverberations, the Thimberland family discovered that their weekend intervention had been the final act in a drama where they were never the protagonists. Alex's apparent vulnerability had been strategic performance. Their cooperation had been evidence collection, and their assumed victory had been the trigger for their own legal destruction.
The quiet, predictable sibling they'd planned to institutionalize had been 10 steps ahead from the beginning. Now, they faced the consequences of underestimating someone whose only crime was being different enough for them to rationalize exploitation as love. By Tuesday afternoon, the Thimberland family's emergency conference call had devolved into barely controlled chaos. 3 separate law firms had declined to represent them after reviewing Alex's meticulously documented case, and the 4th had quoted legal fees that made Arabella's mortgage seem manageable by comparison. "This is insane," Rosalind repeated for the 7th time, her voice oscillating between denial and rage. "Alex couldn't have planned something this elaborate. Someone's manipulating them. Probably that lawyer, taking advantage of their disability."
Arabella's kitchen table had become a war room, covered with printed emails, legal documents, and laptop screens displaying attorney consultation websites. Graham sat in the corner, his unemployment depression deepening as he watched his wife's financial desperation drive increasingly desperate decisions. "Mother, you need to read this business documentation," Arabella insisted, highlighting sections of Alex's client testimonials. "The Berlin Museum, the Smithsonian, institutions across 3 continents. This isn't manipulation. This is evidence of competence we never bothered to recognize." "Alex sits in that room playing with old computers," Rosalind snapped. "That's not a business, it's an obsession that's gotten out of hand." Theodore's voice joined weakly from his phone connection. "I've been looking at the financial records Sebastian Greycourt provided. Last month alone, Alex earned more than I made in my final year before retirement." The silence that followed was deafening. Arabella's resentment about the inheritance had been predicated on Alex wasting their grandmother's legacy, not building it into something valuable. The revelation that Alex's computer hobby generated substantial income undermined months of justification for their intervention. "There has to be an explanation," Rosalind insisted. "Alex can't manage daily living skills independently. We've seen the evidence." "What evidence?" Henry's voice cut through the call with unexpected sharpness. He'd driven straight from his graduate program to join the emergency family meeting, his social work training providing uncomfortable clarity about their situation. "What actual evidence of incapacity did any of us document?" Arabella's marketing instincts recognized the shift in family dynamics. Henry had always been the most sympathetic to Alex, but his tone now carried something beyond sympathy. It carried accusation. "Henry, you agreed Alex needed help," she reminded him carefully. "I agreed they seemed isolated. I never agreed they were incompetent." Henry's laptop screen displayed articles about disability rights and family exploitation that painted their intervention in disturbing new light. "Do you know what the legal term is for what we attempted? It's called financial abuse of a vulnerable adult. The penalties include felony charges." Graham finally spoke from his corner position. "Arabella, I've been quiet through this whole thing, but I need to ask something directly." His unemployed architect's practicality cut through family politics. "How much of this intervention was about helping Alex, and how much was about getting access to the house proceeds?" The question landed like a physical blow. Arabella's silence stretched long enough for everyone to understand the answer. "Graham, you don't understand the financial pressures. I understand that we're 6 months behind on our mortgage and facing foreclosure." His voice carried resignation mixed with moral clarity. "I also understand that stealing from your disabled sibling isn't a solution." "We weren't stealing," Rosalind protested. "We were protecting." "We were rationalizing," Henry interrupted. "Mother, I've spent 2 years studying elder abuse and disability exploitation. Our intervention fits every textbook pattern of family financial abuse disguised as care." Dr. Pemberton's crisis was unfolding separately, but parallel to the family's implosion. Her professional licensing board had opened a formal investigation after receiving Alex's complaint, complete with recorded conversations documenting her willingness to facilitate involuntary commitment without independent assessment. Dr. Pemberton, her attorney explained during their emergency consultation, "The evidence suggests you participated in a coordinated scheme to institutionalize someone based solely on family representations without conducting proper evaluation of their actual capabilities. The family provided extensive documentation from biased sources with financial motivations. Your professional training should have required independent verification."
The attorney's tone was grimly professional. The state licensing board takes these violations very seriously. Meanwhile, Alex's professional network was mobilizing in ways the family never anticipated. Dr. Martinez from the Portland Technology Museum had issued a public statement supporting Alex's competence and condemning attempts to undermine their professional standing. Similar endorsements followed from Berlin, Tokyo, and institutions worldwide. River Kim had taken the initiative to contact Alex's major clients, explaining the family's intervention attempt and providing evidence of Alex's business competence. The response was immediate and overwhelming. 12 international museums jointly signed a letter affirming Alex's professional capabilities and condemning any attempt to question their independence. By evening, Arabella's marriage had reached its breaking point. Graham's moral awakening had crystallized into ultimatum territory.
"I won't be part of this anymore," he told his wife with quiet finality. "Either you find a way to make this right with Alex, or I'm filing for divorce." "Graham, you're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months." His depression had lifted enough to reveal the ethical foundation beneath. "We tried to institutionalize your sibling to steal their inheritance. That's not financial stress. That's criminal behavior." Henry's decision came Tuesday night after reviewing the complete legal documentation. He called Alex directly, breaking the family's united front for the first time in years. "Alex, it's Henry. I need to apologize, and I need to tell you that I support your legal action completely." Alex's response was characteristically measured. "I appreciate that, Henry. But you understand this changes everything between us and the rest of the family?" "I understand that what we did was wrong. Completely. Inexcusably wrong." Henry's voice carried the weight of moral recognition. "I also understand that you're far more capable than any of us ever realized." "Most people are, when others bother to look beyond their assumptions." The family's unity, built on shared assumptions about Alex's limitations and their own moral superiority, crumbled under the weight of evidence and consequence. Some members began recognizing the magnitude of their misconduct, while others doubled down on denial and rationalization. But the damage was done. Alex's legal earthquake had exposed the fault lines in family relationships built on exploitation disguised as love, and the aftershocks would reshape everything that remained. The conference room at Sebastian Greatcourt's law firm carried the sterile authority of legal proceedings, its polished table reflecting the overhead lighting as family members faced the methodical destruction of their justifications. Wednesday morning's depositions had been scheduled with surgical precision. Each family member would confront the evidence separately, their recorded statements becoming part of the permanent legal record. Rosalind sat rigidly in the witness chair, her maternal authority diminished by the formal setting and the recording equipment that captured every word. Sebastian's questioning had been patient, thorough, and devastating. "Mrs. Fairweather, in your recorded conversation with Dr. Pemberton on October 15th, you stated that Alex barely leaves the house anymore. Can you define barely in specific terms?" Rosalind's confident assertions about Alex's isolation crumbled under precise inquiry. "Well, they don't go out socially. Are you aware that during the period you described as increased isolation, Alex traveled to Berlin for a museum consultation, hosted visiting researchers from Japan, and conducted business meetings with collectors across the Pacific Northwest?" The documentation Sebastian presented was overwhelming. Alex's calendar showed regular professional engagements. Their email correspondence revealed complex business negotiations, and their financial records demonstrated sophisticated asset management that contradicted every assumption about their capabilities. "I wasn't aware of..." Rosalind's voice faltered as she realized how completely she'd misunderstood her own child's life. Sebastian's tone remained professionally neutral. "Mrs. Fairweather, in planning the intervention, Did you ever directly ask Alex about their business activities, income sources, or professional relationships? Alex doesn't, they don't usually discuss. The question was whether you ask, not whether you received answers. The silence stretched uncomfortably long before Rosalind admitted, "No, I didn't ask." Arabella's deposition revealed the financial motivations with stark clarity. Her marketing training had taught her to present information persuasively, but Sebastian's questions stripped away professional polish to expose raw calculation. "Miss Whitmore, you stated in your recorded conversation that every day Alex stays in that house costs us money we don't have. Can you explain what you meant by us?" Arabella's carefully constructed justifications about family welfare dissolved under scrutiny. Her mortgage problems, her children's private school expenses, her husband's unemployment, all became evidence of financial desperation that motivated her eagerness to gain control of Alex's assets. "The house was my grandmother's legacy too," she insisted, but even to her own ears, the argument sounded hollow when contrasted with evidence of Alex's successful stewardship of that legacy. Sebastian presented her with Alex's property improvement records, maintenance schedules, and documentation showing the house's value had increased significantly under Alex's management. "Are you aware that Alex has invested over $60,000 in structural improvements and historical preservation during their residence?" The evidence painted Arabella's narrative of Alex wasting the inheritance as completely false. Instead, Alex had enhanced their grandmother's legacy while building a thriving business from the property. Theodore's deposition was the most painful to witness. His Parkinson's tremor worsened under stress, but his genuine love for Alex remained evident even as his participation in the intervention scheme was dissected. "Mr. Ashcombe, in your phone conversation with Alex on October 10th, you mentioned, what if something happened and nobody knew? What specific risks were you concerned about?" Theodore struggled to articulate concerns that seemed more theoretical than factual when examined closely. "Alex spends so much time alone." "Are you aware that Alex maintains daily communication with business partners, has established emergency contacts with neighbors, and uses medical monitoring systems connected to their security company?" Each revelation demonstrated that Alex's supposed isolation was actually professional focus. Their apparent vulnerability was strategic privacy, and their family's protective instincts are based on completely misunderstanding of their actual circumstances. Dr. Pemberton's deposition was clinical disaster. Her professional standing crumbled as Sebastian demonstrated how thoroughly she'd been manipulated by family representations without conducting independent assessment. "Dr. Pemberton, according to your notes, you recommended involuntary placement based primarily on family reports. Did you personally observe any of the behaviors described in those reports?" The family provided detailed documentation. The question was about your personal observations. Her admission that she'd never independently verified the family's claims about Alex's incapacity became damning evidence of professional negligence. The recorded conversations revealed her facility's financial interest in new admissions and her willingness to expedite placement based on insufficient evaluation. Meanwhile, Alex's professional supporters were providing counter-testimony that painted a completely different picture. River Kim's statement was particularly powerful, describing years of friendship with someone who managed complex international business relationships while maintaining genuine personal connections. "Alex is one of the most competent people I know," River testified during their recorded statement. Their business success isn't accidental. It requires sophisticated project management, client relations, and technical expertise that most people don't possess. Dr. Martinez from the Portland Technology Museum provided professional validation that went beyond mere endorsement. Alex's restoration work requires historical research, technical innovation, and project coordination skills that place them among the top professionals in their field globally. The suggestion that they lack capacity for independent living is absurd. The testimony from international clients was equally compelling. The Berlin Museum's curator described Alex as indispensable to their vintage computing collection, while testimonials from Tokyo and London detailed Alex's professional reliability and technical expertise. By Thursday afternoon, the legal proceedings had accomplished more than just building Alex's case. They had forced the family to confront the magnitude of their misconceptions. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and devastating to their justifications. That evening, Theodore made a decision that would define the remainder of his relationship with Alex. Against Rosalind's bitter objections, he called his child directly. "Alex, it's Dad. I need to talk to you. Really talk, not the careful conversations we've been having." Alex's response was cautious, but not hostile. "I'm listening." "I was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong about everything." Theodore's voice carried the weight of genuine recognition.
I let my fear about medical expenses and my guilt about being a burden cloud my judgment about your capabilities.
Dad.
Please let me finish. I've spent 3 days looking at evidence of your business success, your professional relationships, your competence in areas I never bothered to understand. I'm proud of what you've built, and I'm ashamed of what we tried to take away from you. The conversation that followed was tentative, painful, but marked the beginning of genuine reconciliation built on respect rather than assumption. For the first time in years, Theodore spoke to Alex as an accomplished adult rather than a child needing protection. The legal reckoning was nearly complete, but the personal reckoning would take much longer. 3 weeks after the depositions concluded, settlement negotiations took place in the same conference room where the family's justifications had been systematically dismantled. The legal documents spread across Sebastian Greycourt's table represented more than financial resolution. They constituted formal acknowledgement of Alex's competence and autonomy. Rosalind sat stiffly beside her attorney, her maternal authority permanently diminished by weeks of confronting evidence she could no longer deny. The settlement terms were straightforward, but symbolically devastating. Formal written acknowledgement of Alex's legal and financial competence, public retraction of all claims about their incapacity, and legally binding agreements never to pursue guardianship or involuntary commitment proceedings. "Mrs. Fairweather," Sebastian said, as documents were signed, "your son has agreed to forego monetary damages in exchange for these formal acknowledgments and your written apology. That represents considerable generosity given the scope of harm attempted." Rosalind's handwritten apology, required as part of the settlement, had taken her 4 drafts to complete. The final version abandoned attempts at justification in favor of simple admission. "I failed to recognize Alex's capabilities and attempted to control their life based on my own misconceptions about autism and independence. I formally acknowledge their competence and apologize for the harm my actions could have caused." Arabella's settlement was more complex, involving her acknowledgement that financial motivations had driven their participation in the intervention scheme. Her marketing career would survive the legal proceedings, but her relationship with Alex remained fractured by the revelation of her calculated approach to their supposed vulnerability. Dr. Pemberton's settlement included professional sanctions and mandatory training on disability rights and proper evaluation protocols. Her licensing board's review had resulted in formal reprimand and requirements for supervised practice in cases involving disability assessment. But the most significant changes were occurring outside legal channels.
Theodore's recognition of his profound misjudgment had sparked genuine transformation in his relationship with Alex. Their first real conversation in years had taken place in Alex's workshop, surrounded by the evidence of professional competence he'd never bothered to understand. "I spent 3 years talking to you like a child," Theodore admitted, examining a restoration project Alex was completing for a museum in Amsterdam. "I never asked about your work, your clients, your life. I just assumed." "You assumed that autism meant incapacity," Alex replied, their voice carrying no trace of bitterness. "It's a common mistake, often an expensive one." Theodore's medical expenses had become manageable through proper insurance advocacy, assistance Alex had quietly arranged through professional contacts in healthcare navigation. The irony wasn't lost on either of them that Alex's supposed incompetence had led to practical solutions for the family's financial stress. Henry's transformation was equally significant, but less personally motivated. His social work training had provided theoretical understanding of disability rights, but watching his family's exploitation attempt unfold had given him visceral comprehension of how easily good intentions could mask harmful actions. "I want to specialize in family advocacy for disabled adults," Henry called Alex during one of their new regular coffee meetings. "What happened to you happens to thousands of people every year, and most don't have your resources to fight back." Alex's response was characteristically practical. "There are legal precedents from this case that could be useful for other advocacy situations. Sebastian's firm would probably share strategy documentation for educational purposes." Their collaboration on disability rights advocacy became Henry's pathway to genuine allyship rather than protective paternalism. His graduate thesis would eventually focus on family financial exploitation of disabled relatives, using Alex's case as a central example of successful resistance. River Kim had watched Alex's transformation throughout the legal proceedings with a mixture of pride and relief. Their friend's strategic brilliance had always been evident in their restoration work, but applying those same skills to family dynamics had revealed depths of capability that impressed even River. "You've built something amazing here," River observed, reviewing Alex's expanding international client base. The legal victory had paradoxically increased demand for Alex's services as the public documentation of their competence attracted collectors and institutions worldwide. "The Berlin Fellowship starts in 6 months," Alex replied, their tone carrying quiet satisfaction. 6 months of working with their complete vintage collection, plus consulting fees that will secure the house indefinitely. Graham Morrison's moral awakening had saved his marriage to Arabella, but required extensive counseling to address the financial desperation that had driven their participation in the exploitation scheme. His unemployment had ended with a position at a sustainable architecture firm, though their financial recovery would take years. "I keep thinking about how close we came to destroying someone's life for money we didn't even need. Alex's business generates more monthly income than most people's annual salaries, and we were planning to institutionalize them to access their assets." Arabella's recognition of her financial motivations had been more reluctant but equally necessary. Her relationship with Alex remained strained, marked by formal politeness rather than genuine connection, but she'd gained understanding of how her business mindset had dehumanized her sibling. Rosalind faced the hardest choice of all. Her decades of controlling behavior couldn't be changed through legal settlement or family pressure, only through personal recognition that love without respect ultimately became harm. Her last conversation with Alex was brief but definitive. "I still think you need more support than you're willing to accept. Then you still don't understand who I actually am."
And until you do, we can't have a meaningful relationship. The Victorian house remained Alex's sanctuary, but it was no longer a refuge from family interference. Instead, it had become the headquarters of an internationally recognized restoration business, protected by legal precedent and professional reputation. River found Alex in the workshop one evening, working on a computer from the early days of personal computing, while video conferencing with colleagues in 3 different time zones. "Any regrets about how things played out?" River asked. Alex considered the question while carefully aligning a circuit board. "I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret protecting myself from people who confused love with control." The new foundations were solid, built on respect rather than assumption, autonomy rather than dependence. Some family relationships had been rebuilt on healthier ground, while others had ended entirely. But for the first time in years, Alex's life was completely their own. The intervention had failed spectacularly, but in its failure, it had accomplished something the family never intended. It had forced them to see Alex as they actually were, rather than as they'd assumed them to be. 6 months after the legal settlements were finalized, the reverberations of Alex's case continued reshaping lives in ways no one had anticipated. The Portland legal community had taken notice of Sebastian Greycourt's methodology, and his firm received a steady stream of similar cases. Disabled adults whose families had confused care with control, love with exploitation. Dr. Pemberton stood before the Oregon State Board of Licensed Professional Counselors for her final review hearing, the weight of professional redemption heavy on her shoulders. The mandatory training on disability rights and proper evaluation protocols had fundamentally altered her understanding of competence assessment. Dr. Pemberton, the board chairwoman stated, "Your case has prompted statewide policy changes in assisted living placement procedures. No facility can now accept residents based solely on family representation without independent professional evaluation." The changes extended beyond policy. Sunset Manor had implemented new protocols requiring multiple assessment sources, mandatory waiting periods for family-initiated placements, and staff training on recognizing potential exploitation scenarios. Dr. Pemberton's professional humiliation had become educational foundation for protecting others. "The Thimberland case study is now required reading in our certification program," she explained to her supervising psychiatrist during their monthly review. "What I mistook for family concern was actually coordinated financial exploitation. The training helps identify red flags I completely missed." Her practice had survived, but barely. Several families had transferred their relatives to other facilities when news of the legal proceedings became public. The survivors were those who valued the new protective protocols over the previous streamlined admission process. Theodore's transformation proved the most genuine among the family members. His relationship with Alex had rebuilt slowly, constructed on mutual respect rather than parental assumption. Their weekly coffee meetings had become the foundation for honest communication about his medical needs and Alex's business success. "I've been thinking about your offer to help navigate the insurance appeals," Theodore said during their Thursday morning meeting at Alex's kitchen table. The Victorian house had become comfortable territory for him again, but now he saw the workshop equipment as professional tools rather than expensive toys. "The advocacy specialist I connected you with has experience with Parkinson's cases," Alex replied, reviewing documentation on their laptop. "She thinks your denied claims have strong appeal potential." Theodore's medical expenses had stabilized through proper advocacy, a service Alex had arranged quietly through their professional network. The irony remained sharp. The family member they'd considered incapable of managing daily life had solved the financial crisis that motivated their exploitation attempt. "Alex, I need to ask you something directly." Theodore set down his coffee with hands that trembled less than they had 6 months earlier. "Do you forgive me?" Alex considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "I forgive your mistakes, Dad. I'm still working on forgiving the assumptions that enabled those mistakes." "Fair enough. I'm still working on identifying all those assumptions myself." Henry's academic work had gained national attention as his thesis on family financial exploitation evolved into a comprehensive study of disability rights enforcement. His advisor had connected him with federal researchers studying patterns of family-based financial abuse, and Alex's case provided compelling evidence for policy recommendations. "The Department of Justice wants to interview you about the case methodology," Henry told Alex during one of their research sessions. your documentation strategies could become standard recommendations for protecting vulnerable adults. Alex's response was typically practical. Sebastian's firm has already provided template documents to 3 other disability rights organizations. The legal strategies are more valuable than individual testimony. But Henry's transformation went beyond academic interest. His vocal advocacy within the family had established him as Alex's primary ally, someone who could bridge the gap between their siblings' competing perspectives and their parents' generational assumptions. River Kim had watched their friend's confidence grow throughout the legal aftermath with satisfaction that bordered on parental pride. Alex's business had expanded internationally, but more importantly, their self-advocacy had inspired other neurodivergent entrepreneurs to document their own competence proactively. The support group you started is getting requests from other states, apparently teaching people to document their capabilities before family interventions is revolutionary thinking.
Alex's slight smile carried genuine warmth. It shouldn't be revolutionary, but apparently most people wait until they're under attack to prove their competence. The support group met monthly in Alex's workshop, bringing together neurodivergent adults who'd faced or feared family exploitation. The meetings combined practical legal education with emotional support, creating a network of mutual protection that extended far beyond Portland. Arabella's choices had been the most painful for the family to witness. Her marriage to Graham had survived through intensive counseling, but her relationship with Alex remained formally cordial rather than genuinely connected. Her professional success had continued, but the legal proceedings had forced recognition of how her financial desperation had corrupted her family relationships. "I keep trying to find ways to make this right with Alex," she confided to Graham during one of their counseling sessions. "But every attempt feels like another manipulation attempt." Graham's unemployment had ended with a position designing accessible housing, work that kept his sister-in-law's case constantly in mind. Maybe making it right isn't about grand gestures. Maybe it's about respecting the boundaries Alex has established. Arabella's attempts at reconciliation had been rebuffed not with hostility, but with cool professional courtesy. Alex answered her calls, responded to her emails, but maintained emotional distance that acknowledged their siblingship without embracing forgiveness. Rosalind faced the starkest choice of all. Her decades of maternal control couldn't be reformed through legal settlement or family pressure, only through personal recognition that her love had become indistinguishable from harm. Her final attempt at reconciliation came during an unexpected visit to Alex's house, arriving without announcement on a rainy October afternoon. "I've been seeing a therapist," she announced from Alex's doorstep, her authority diminished by months of confronting her misconceptions. "Someone who specializes in family dynamics and disability issues." Alex opened the door wider, but didn't invite her inside. "That's good, Mom. How's it going?" "She's helping me understand how my need to protect you became a need to control you." Rosalind's voice carried unfamiliar humility. "I still don't fully understand your business, your capabilities, your life, but I'm trying to accept that my understanding isn't required for your success." "That's progress. Is it enough for us to have a relationship again?" Alex's pause stretched long enough for Rosalind to hear the workshop equipment humming in the background, evidence of the professional life she'd never bothered to comprehend. "Not yet," Alex said finally, "but it's a beginning." The conversation ended with Rosalind leaving contact information for her therapist, suggesting family counseling when Alex felt ready. No timeline, no pressure, no ultimatums. Just an offer of professional mediation for rebuilding trust that had been destroyed by assumptions disguised as love. The consequences of the family's intervention attempt continued rippling outward, creating policy changes, legal precedents, and personal transformations that extended far beyond their original scope. Some family members had chosen growth and recognition. Others remained trapped by their inability to accept Alex's autonomy. But Alex's life had finally become completely their own, protected by legal precedent and professional reputation, supported by genuine allies rather than controlling relatives.
The Victorian house remained their sanctuary, but it was no longer a refuge from family interference. It had become the headquarters of a thriving business and a symbol of what disabled individuals could achieve when their competence was recognized rather than assumed away. 1 year after the intervention that changed everything, Alex Thimberland stood in the arrivals terminal of Berlin's Brandenburg Airport, their workshop toolkit carefully packed in specialized shipping containers that had preceded them across the Atlantic. The 6-month fellowship at the Berlin Museum of Technology represented the culmination of their professional recognition, not despite their family's attempted exploitation, but because of how they defended against it. Dr. Klaas Weber, the museum's chief curator, greeted Alex with the respect accorded to international experts in their field. The collection documentation you provided in advance was extraordinary. We've never had such detailed restoration proposals. Alex's methodical nature had impressed the Berlin team during months of preliminary planning. Their approach to vintage computer restoration had evolved beyond technical expertise into historical preservation that museums worldwide now consider the gold standard. The fellowship will give me access to systems I have only read about, Alex replied, their confidence natural rather than performed. Some of these machines represent computing history that exists nowhere else. The professional validation felt profoundly different from their family's eventual recognition. The Berlin appointment had come through merit, through demonstrated expertise that required no explanation or justification. Dr. Weber saw Alex's autism as simply another aspect of their personality, irrelevant to their technical qualifications. Back in Portland, the Victorian house continued operating as Alex's business headquarters, but its role had expanded beyond personal sanctuary. The monthly support group meetings had grown into a regional network for neurodivergent adults facing family exploitation, with participants traveling from 3 states to attend Alex's workshops on legal self-protection. River Kim had become Alex's business partner in more than name, managing client communications during Alex's Berlin residency while developing their own expertise in vintage electronics restoration. The friendship had provided the emotional foundation that enabled Alex's professional growth: genuine support without paternalism, encouragement without control. The Tokyo Museum inquiry came through this morning. They want to commission a complete Commodore restoration series. The contract terms are better than anything we've handled before. Alex reviewed the proposal from their Berlin apartment, its windows overlooking the city where their professional reputation had achieved international recognition. Accept it, but schedule the work for after my return. I want to handle that project personally. Their business had tripled in scope since the legal proceedings concluded. The public documentation of Alex's competence had attracted collectors and institutions who valued both their technical skills and their proven ability to manage complex international projects. Professional success had become the most powerful refutation of their family's assumptions about autism and capability. Theodore's relationship with Alex had rebuilt slowly but solidly, founded on mutual respect rather than parental protection. His weekly phone calls to Berlin carried genuine interest in Alex's work rather than concerns about their welfare. The insurance appeal you helped me prepare was approved, Theodore reported during their Thursday conversation. The new medication is covered completely, and my neurologist thinks the tremor improvement is significant. That's excellent news, Dad. Alex, I need to say something I should have said months ago. Theodore's voice carried the weight of genuine recognition. I'm proud of what you've accomplished. Not just the business success, but the courage to defend yourself when we failed to see who you really are. Their relationship would never return to childhood patterns of dependence and protection, but it had evolved into something healthier, adult recognition between equals who happened to share family history. Henry's advocacy work had expanded beyond academic research into active legal support for disabled adults facing family exploitation. His collaboration with Sebastian Greycourt's firm had produced template documents now used by disability rights organizations nationwide. 3 more cases this month used your documentation strategies, Henry reported during Alex's last visit before departing for Berlin. 2 of them settled out of court when families realized their targets had prepared comprehensive evidence files. Alex's methods had become preventative medicine for disability exploitation, teaching vulnerable adults to document their competence before their families questioned it, creating evidence files that deterred rather than merely defended against intervention attempts. Rosalind's transformation had been the most limited among family members. Her therapy sessions had provided intellectual understanding of her controlling behavior, but emotional acceptance of Alex's autonomy remained incomplete. Their relationship existed in careful détente, monthly phone calls marked by formal politeness rather than intimate connection. "I saw the article about your Berlin appointment in the local paper," she mentioned during their last conversation before Alex's departure. "I told my therapist I felt proud and sad at the same time." "Sad about what, Mom?" "Sad that it took a lawsuit for me to learn who my own child really is." The honesty was progress, even if reconciliation remained distant. Alex had established clear boundaries that acknowledged their family relationship while protecting their autonomy. Love without respect remained impossible, but respect could eventually rebuild a foundation for genuine affection. Arabella's relationship with Alex had stabilized into professional courtesy without warmth. Her financial recovery had removed the desperation that motivated her participation in the exploitation attempt. But trust, broken by calculated betrayal, proved difficult to repair. They exchanged holiday cards and birthday acknowledgments, siblings by genetics rather than choice. Graham Morrison's architectural work had evolved toward accessible design, his experience with Alex's case informing projects that centered disabled people's autonomy rather than others' convenience. His marriage had survived through recognition that financial stress never justified exploiting vulnerable family members. The broader impact of Alex's resistance extended far beyond their family's education. Sebastian Greycourt's firm had developed a practice specialty in disability financial exploitation, using Alex's case methodology to protect dozens of vulnerable adults. Dr. Pemberton's professional sanctions had sparked statewide policy changes in assisted living placement procedures. The support group Alex had founded met monthly in their workshop, bringing together neurodivergent adults who shared strategies for documenting competence and protecting autonomy. The network had become a model for other cities, proof that disabled people could organize their own protection rather than relying on family or institutional benevolence. As Alex settled into their Berlin residency, surrounded by computing history and respected colleagues who valued their expertise, the contrast with their family's attempted intervention felt like different lifetimes. The vulnerable, isolated person their family had imagined bore no resemblance to the internationally recognized professional they'd actually become. The Victorian house remained Alex's sanctuary, but it was no longer a hiding place. Instead, it had become headquarters for a thriving business, meeting space for a protective community, and symbol of what disabled individuals could achieve when their competence was recognized rather than assumed away. River's final text before Alex's departure captured the transformation perfectly. Your family tried to institutionalize you to protect their inheritance. Instead, you built an international career that proved their assumptions wrong. That's not just justice, that's poetry. Alex's response was characteristically practical. It's also evidence that underestimating people based on disability assumptions carries consequences, sometimes expensive ones. The intervention had failed completely, but in its failure, it had accomplished something the family never intended. It had forced them to see Alex as they actually were: competent, successful, and deserving of the same autonomy afforded to any adult. Some had chosen to build new relationships on that foundation. Others remained trapped by their inability to accept what they'd discovered. But Alex's life was finally, completely theirs. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.